Jordy Ma.
Cool. Well, we're recording, and we can dive right in because I only booked 30 minutes for us.
Cool.
I don't know.
And I'm meeting with him tomorrow.
Do 30 or an hour, but I figured we could be efficient.
Sounds good.
Why don't I share my screen, and we can talk through. So I tagged. Should I share the right one? Yeah, I'll share this one. I tagged a handful of comments on the retro with a construction emoji, which were the ones I explicitly wanted to talk about. But if you all had any that you wanted to talk about, why don't we start there, and you can call them out and tell me where to scroll, and then we can dig into them and capture notes in the comment itself.
Hey, Justin, kind of hard to see with the dark mode and the size of the copy.
Oh, dark mode. You're right. Actually, I should. Here, hold on.
If you don't mind, yeah, it's increasing the font grade, and maybe just for the screen sharing, if we could go out of dark mode. It would
Trying to be cool with dark mode here. Hold on.
Dark mode is cool.
How do I change? Anyone know? Oh, do I do this? Navigation theme?
Yeah. You trying to get off dark mode?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're up there at the top. That's right.
That right here. Just go light, and then it should work.
Yeah. I haven't tried any of the other colors now that you say that.
There we go. All right. Let's go back to retro issue. There it is.
Cool.
Is that better, Farnoosh?
It is better. Thank you.
Okay.
Awesome. And I'm just scrolling through now to make sure we talk about anything that I want to talk about too.
Okay. Well, why don't I start with one of mine, and then feel free to interject. But I think one of the big ones was, or one of the easy ones maybe, that Farnoosh and I talked about this a little bit already, but this one here. So tracking feedback, I wrote this, tracking feedback items can make your head spin, my head. Was that in the MR? Did we address that feedback from Slack, et cetera, et cetera? And so my suggestion was either ask for any feedback in Slack to be added as threads to the release post MR. So that's like, instead of Sid, just responding to the Slack thread with like a massive mega reply, have him go and add individual comments in the MR itself. And then make it clear that any feedback in Slack won't be addressed unless it's been added to the MR. The alternate option, if we're not going to be able to convince execs to do that, which is probably likely, is any feedback shared in Slack, the release post manager is responsible for transferring those items as individual comments and threads on the release post MR itself. And so then it turns out that there was a process for this, but it wasn't merged.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think is my second suggestion, right, Farnoosh?
Yeah. So I think so. I would love it if we gave this process a shot before we came up with new ones, because Cindy did this kind of off the cuff for 13.0, and it was made it really easy. So the process that's supposed to happen, and I think we just need to change, we probably need to close this MR, and what she documented in this MR, I think, can become the release post manager's responsibility. So basically, I think it's pretty straightforward. What we have done for like the last two is we, post in Slack, they make their comments, and someone, in this case, it's been me the last cycle, just copy and paste and create checklist items in one comment.
Gotcha.
If y'all just look at 13.0 and 13.1, you'll see. And it was, I think if the release post manager does it, it makes a lot of sense, because the release post manager is posting in Slack. So they can kind of keep an eye on that thread and be like, okay, I transferred what I wanted to. If there's a new comment, okay, cool, there's a new comment. I'm going to add that to the checklist in the MR and assign it to someone. You know what I mean? That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, the other great thing about this, Farnoosh, is that it blocks the MR from being merged unless you resolve the thread.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right?
Exactly. So, and then what I did specifically in 13.1 is I made sure I captured Sid's comments very clearly as Sid's, and then everyone else's comments I captured as theirs. and then I assigned it to PMs or to the PMM or to the messaging lead in some cases, Cormac. I just made sure they were all assigned and then asked people to check off their items when they were done.
Yeah, I think we should try it for sure. I noticed, I think I took kind of a hybrid approach in general, right? Started with some docs, used issues, Slack, and I think that worked really well. And I think I was a little confused here on the scope of sourcing feedback. I was thinking you were telling everyone just go into the actual release post draft and just line by line suggest their stuff. And I was like, that's cool for a few cases, right? Like Josh had some really good feedback last time, but I was thinking that could get super messy if everyone just went in and just started throwing them. We had to go and look through and say, are we going to accept this or alter it? So I had a disconnect there. This makes complete sense to just have a comment with checkboxes for the feedbacks and just bring them over from Slack. And I think the onus is on, Justin and myself or the release post manager and the PMM to work together and work as a team to get them all resolved. Like him and I were talking, we were pretty much attached at the hip, the whole process. And I think that was part of the success, right? Along with Suzanne, who just was on top of it from the beginning. So.
Yeah, no, completely. Our action doesn't quite look right though, Justin. Sorry, before you go away from it. So I would recommend we mark really clear actions for each of these items, whether we work on this retro, async, or live right now. So action assigned to someone who's merged that MR. However, we don't want to merge that MR because Cindy added that to the messaging lead tasks. So what I'm saying is someone needs to own closing her MR or changing her MR to add those instructions for the release post manager and add an MR task list to the MR or just note to the handbook or both or whatever makes sense.
I'll take it. But before I merge that new MR, I have a naive question, which is I like Justin's option 1 a lot better because it's one less step for some middleman to carry out. KBY Chu, Justin. What's the resistance for execs to just use GitLab, the product?
I'm going to answer that as honestly as I can without I don't know. So I think that there's 2 aspects of it. I think that this is a short-term process and I want to create as little spin as possible. Yeah. So I think we're getting pretty consistent engagement really quickly via Slack and then everyone sees it, whereas not everyone's looking at the MR. And I know that's kind of on GitLab, we should be dog fooding, but the reality of it is it's a lot easier when Sid and the gang post in Slack because the PMs are a lot more likely to all see it there and jump on the thread than they are in the MR. So it's kind of like an on GitLab, not dog fooding way to handle it. But also it just makes the MR a little bit harder to manage if Sid goes in there and Josh goes in there and Jason goes in there and makes a bunch of suggestions before the PM has a chance to maybe negotiate their way out of it. Does that make sense? So it just kind of makes the MR really messy, which again, from a dog fooding perspective, you could argue, well, we should be figuring that out. But I don't know if that's the battle we want to deal with. Like this process is kind of, we're shifting out of it anyway in the long term. So I just want to keep it simple. I don't know if that makes sense, Kevin.
You're muted.
Oh, yes, it does make sense. Thank you. That's helpful.
Okay.
I think it's about being nimble, Farnoosh. For me, it was good to get the feedback immediately, as you said, and then be able to ask follow-up questions and have a live conversation or as close to live as possible in those crunch times because our head's on a swivel, right? And every minute really does matter on some of those days. So for me personally, I think starting with Slack, typically adding another tool or adding another step in the process is the over-engineering aspect. But I think actually starting in Slack prevents us from over-engineering it and having to go back and take more time and more overhead to go through each individual.
Yeah. So for example, if it's helpful for Kevin, for you to know, since you're running the next one, I'll be shadowing you and supporting you regardless, I'm here. But I actually, once they post in Slack, I wait. Yep. I wait and because some of the comments resolve themselves and then I don't have to copy and paste everything over. This is kind of a nit, Justin. Can we not check mark something green? Can the person who has the action check mark it green when they actually perform?
Yes.
especially for the async items, as you and I go through and assign them to people, I think we need to clearly say action, per retro discussion, Kevin will XYZ, and then Kevin can come back and check this off so we know it's actually done. I'm actually going through the last 2 retros and getting people to check mark stuff and finding that a lot of stuff wasn't done.
Is there anything you need from me for this one? Do I need to alter that existing mark from Cindy or relay anything back to the PMM team? No.
Nope, we never implemented it.
Yeah, Kevin can do it, and he can tag, whoever in his change, and
Okay.
just so everyone's aware.
And Kevin, please, would you mind just tagging me on all this stuff for review?
Yeah, of course.
Cool. Let's press on. Is there any others that people want to call out?
I don't know where it is in the retro, but I do want to call out that we need to, I want to work with you, Parker, to take a stab at cleaning up the messaging lead instructions and not having 2 SSOTs.
Okay.
That kind of slipped and no one's done it on the marketing side the last 3 cycles.
Yep.
And we just need to have a clear checklist that links to instructions and not duplicate content on both sides. So
yeah, and that's something I'm happy to help with. I just didn't have time during the madness last week to do it. Are you talking about from the handbook page itself?
Yeah.
Versus the actual the checklist that we're doing in the MR as we go along, or are we talking 2 different handbook pages here?
No, so what's happening right now is if you look at your checklist, there's quite a bit of duplicative content between your checklist and the handbook instructions.
Okay,
So what I'm suggesting is if you look at like the release post manager stuff, you'll see that there's a checklist in the MR template for the release post manager. We don't repeat all that stuff in the handbook. The handbook is mostly just instructions that we've linked through when necessary from the MR checklist. And I think that writer lead stuff is like that too. When you're ready to pick this one back up, feel free to set up a little time with me. So that
what do you think, while we're on, I don't want to eat up too much time, but you and I can take it offline since we have a bunch of people, but are you thinking, which one are you thinking? MR being the single source of truth or the handbook?
Yeah, so the MR needs to be the single source of truth for that task list, the things that you do.
Okay.
Handbook needs to be the single source of truth for the deep dive, anywhere instructions are needed.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Then I'll set up the time and we'll talk about it and we'll get it right. That makes sense.
Can I think the tech writing list has the same issue? Like the list in the MR is really easy to follow and simple, and then there's stuff in the handbook that I'm like, do we really have to do this? It wasn't listed in the. So I'd like to. So from my end, how do you feel? Is it okay if I just open an MR on the handbook and then assign it to you all, and you can take a look and.
Yeah, I would say, why don't you open up an MR and let's just collaborate on it.
Okay, great. Because I have a list of things where I was just like, what? This is like, there's a difference between just like it taking a few hours and it taking several days. And it's some of those details that are listed in the handbook. So
yeah, I'm totally happy to help because I'm being super annoying about this because what happened when when I first inherited the release post, it was a nightmare because there was content on both sides that contradicted each other.
Yep.
So Patrick Dooley and I were like, you have a checklist and then you have more detailed instructions that you link to when necessary.
Okay.
And so that you don't have to manage 2 places. So I'm happy to help work with you, Parker, and also work with you, Suzanne, whenever you guys pick it up.
Yep, because all the sum of the parts equals the whole, right? Or is greater than the whole. So when we're all in our little place and we're doing it right, then everything is lost.
Okay, awesome. That was okay, great, cool.
Sweet. Can we talk about briefly what happens when the script fails, the content assembly script fails?
Yes.
I had it up a second ago. I don't remember.
Did James Ramsey comment on that?
No, he did not.
He's on PTO this week. There's a couple key things that I don't know, so I think that it's good to have a setup back. What you and I did, Justin, we should document that in the handbook and just say, in case your content assembly script fails, here's manual instructions, right? So I think we just need to do that, and I'm happy to work on that with you. The other thing is, the other action that I'm happy to take with James is, I don't understand why we can't lock the script. It shouldn't be able to get changed willy-nilly.
So I think the short answer as to why is that it's it's a script that lives in a much bigger set of files, or a much bigger file that does a lot more things than just assemble the content, because it's like a single rake file
Right.
for the entire handbook.
So
So
there's gotta be a way though to like at least give a warning if they're about to do something that's going to change that script. And
I think there's a couple options.
Yeah.
I can write this down, but it's either build some tests that test the rake file, and I don't know, that might be an Eric Schroeder kind of static site editor team question. The other option is make that thing have code owners where only certain people can merge changes,
That one.
and you have like a few people that are, DRIs for making sure that thing works. And it's probably like engineering managers or engineers on the static site team or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good point. I think that maybe, and we can tag Eric in this and discuss it with him live or async, but maybe the thing to do is say, hey, is there an engineer on your team that could be a code owner so that they could, I don't know. It's like, I feel like it can't be like they're watching it all the time. They need to somehow be notified when there's been a change that could affect that script so that then they know they need to go through and test it. And this is something that this is, I'm guessing, why the pipeline broke that morning. They couldn't run it automated on the pipeline.
Yeah, I looked at the thing that fixed it, and that's why the pipeline broke.
Yeah, so we can't put this on a pipeline ever until we figure out how to.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if it's a good idea to put it on a pipeline, but we definitely can't until we figure out. So maybe the action is you and I, one of us can just talk to Eric Schroeder about it. And if you tag me, I can make sure to put it on Product Operations Weekly so that it gets discussed with him.
Okay.
I'm happy to take that action if it helps.
Has that ever happened before, by the way? I was curious. I know it happened to be on Saturday. Okay, cool.
Well, the script hasn't broken before, but the script is also new. It just surfaced in 12.10.
Okay.
So, to be clear, the script didn't break. It got changed. It was just putting stuff in a different folder.
Gotcha.
So, which James fixed.
The hard thing about testing this too, I can imagine, is that we only really do it once a month, and it's like a big thing that like recreating that test environment and the test conditions is like, what are you going to do? Have a bunch of PMs go like create release post items and then run it? Like that's a hard thing to reproduce. So
yeah, it is a hard thing to reproduce. Again, I think this is kind of a short-term problem, but not really, because I think we want to be able to use the scripts with confidence in the future when we have stuff in a different repository in release and a messaging lead wants to generate this blog, right?
Yeah.
So it's not actually a short-term problem. This is one, it's a super helpful one to figure out. So I'm happy to try and figure it out with Eric.
Cool. All right.
Check, by the way.
Yeah. What else? Anything else? Anyone got a juicy one that we should talk about?
I'm looking. I feel like a lot of these can have this. So for the second time in a row, I feel like our retro is really straightforward and pretty light, which is great. I feel like a lot of these things, we can probably look at async, you and I, Justin, and determine actions and assign them to people on this team or other people. But let me take a look and see if there's any other juicy ones. What about Suzanne and Parker? Are there any juicy ones for you want to discuss?
I was going to say it's not a juicy one, but I know somewhere in this list is the YouTube embed links.
Yep.
And I can take an action item I need to update the template because in the tech writer section of the template, it doesn't mention it. It mentions it in the PM part, but it'd be good to have the tech writer check that when they're doing a release.
I think I just merged.
Good.
That does
Sweet.
that, but you should look and make sure I did the right thing because I definitely don't all the time.
No worries.
I will find it.
Yeah, no worries.
Send it to you. But yeah.
And then the other one was, I just, two things really quick. I just wanted to say, I didn't put it in here and I'll add it, but I just want to say like it really worked well for me to have everything in a folder and be able to go through it and not worry about the things that were still in flux. And the fact that Justin and Kevin that you guys were handling, and all of you were handling everything that was in flux while I just got to work on things that were sort of solidly in the bucket, was hugely helpful. And then the last thing was just the features YAML, which I don't even really want to talk about, but I was thinking about it. It's like there were somewhere between 15 and 20 probably primary features, and if every release we add another 15 to 20 primary features to the features YAML, I mean, the features YAML is just massive, and it makes me question what's happening with that. But that's probably a bigger discussion.
Yeah, that's a bigger discussion, to be honest with you. Yeah. That doesn't really have anything to do with the release post.
Yes, so let's shelf it. That's totally fine.
I'll give you the high level. So everything in theory from the beginning of time, everything is supposed to be added to the features YAML. Primary, secondary, everything. The reason being that we leverage the features YAML to push and pull content all sorts of places, right? Then what happened is we started building and shipping more things. A couple cycles ago, we decided we're going to limit it to just adding primary items and not secondary items. So it's better than it was before. I think PMs are now pretty consistent about it because now they know if it's primary, I add it. If it's secondary, I don't worry about it. Whereas before they were just confused and it was a mess. But we're not retroactively fixing it. This is just the rule now. I think it's really the job of the messaging lead to push back if there's too many primary items. You own that intro. So if we think that hey, why are we having more and more primary items? Then I think it's really the messaging lead's call to be like, hey, I don't think these things are primary items. And then this happened last cycle, a healthy conversation happens with the PM and the PMM of that item, and a decision is made as to whether it should be kept primary or not, right? So we even have stuff we added to the handbook that, hey, PM and PMM, make sure you're aligned that something is really primary because you might get pushback. But other than that, I don't think it's something we can or fix. And I'm trying to figure out in the back of my mind how to fix the features YAML problem as we shift into release notes, but that's kind of a bigger, does that help?
Yeah. No, we don't need
I have a hot off the press suggestion, which is, can we get all the PMs to tag the primary MRs, release post MRs? Because the only way you can tell, I think, right now is looking at the actual YAML of the release post, right? But if they tag it, you can flag it early. You can be, whoever's reviewing will probably have more scrutiny of that release post than the secondary ones. And I don't know what implication this has, but having that early signal may be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, early is the key word for this process.
Yeah, early is the keyword. That's a great idea. And I'm thinking of how that may or may not be something that is helpful or that we would keep when we shift to getting kind of rid of this process and having this content generated as part of the issue and surfacing in the release feature. So I would love to document your suggestion so that we can take it into consideration as to whether it would make sense to do it now and then continue doing it, whether it's going to become irrelevant later. I can't think hard enough to figure that out right now. Because I think it might actually be something that helps us when we roll into the release feature as well.
Yeah, I feel like if you add a label, I'm assuming you're suggesting a label, Kevin, right?
It could end up on the issue. You know what I mean? Instead of that.
And you could, with James's new create me a release post item script, that would be easy to make it do that. So then you're not.
Yeah.
Right?
So yeah, I mean, I would say if we can document that suggestion and then just tag me in it so that I can keep that in mind as we're shifting, figuring out how to shift into generating the content blocks and issues longer term. This could be something that's not just useful today, but useful ongoing for how we sort and pull things into the release feature as well. Justin, I sent you a link because I'm confused. You took notes and gave Parker and I an action, but it's not on my comment about it. Was there a duplicate comment?
Uh-oh. What did I do?
Zoomed you. I just can't find. I Zoom linked you something, just so you know.
Zoom link. Hold on. Let me just capture that. To my. Hold on, let me. Oh, where did I put that? Uh-oh.
That's what I'm wondering is where you put the actions on this.
Uh,
I was like, where'd it go? Is there anything else you all want to talk about?
oh. Right.
Yeah, I was wondering where it was.
There's a you had a duplicate comment.
Great, then I will look and delete one of my comments.
So like
one
this
didn't
one,
comment
this
on
one
it.
here. We identify the duplicate nature of messaging instructions in the handbook and MR template.
Yeah.
And then this guy up
Yeah.
here, which is we need to not have two single sources of truth across.
I'm glad I could do that. I was like, why is it I can't find the other one? I love that it's like I duplicated my own comment. Yeah, awesome. I will
right.
delete the other one.
We're at time. Anything else? I agree that there's a lot of these that I guess Farnoosh, I'll take an action just to kind of crawl through all of them and follow up async and tag y'all on actions, but I think they're pretty straightforward. But if there's any last minute ones someone wants to point attention to, we can. But otherwise, we're at time.
Everyone did a fantastic
one question for Farnoosh. Is there a release post manager shadow for next one, or is it yourself?
So great question. I think the one after Kevin, Eric Schurter is running. I think he committed. So I just need to make sure he realizes he needs to shadow this one more actively and work with Kevin directly. Okay. And then I'm here. I'm not abandoning this process for many reasons, namely because I just want to make sure that I'm supporting everyone doing it, but also I have to keep the beat on it as we shift into having release notes and modifying it as needed.
Awesome. Thank you.
So I just want to say y'all did a fantastic job. Thank you. It was a fantastic release post. So few comments from Sid. You know, I think Kevin jumping in and helping with the content reviews as shadow was fantastic. It really helped. Y'all did a great job. So thank you for all your hard work. It was beautiful.
I will just add that Sid said explicitly it was the best release post ever.
So he's never said that before.
He said that I was wondering if he said that every time. I was like,
like a kind of like ongoing thing is best release ever. This time he said best release post. So I think y'all killed it. I mean, he literally had like no comments. Like it was crazy. I was like, this is a proud moment. So y'all killed
Parker,
it.
Justin, and Suzanne, you should put that on your LinkedIn.
Yeah, that's right. Endorsed.
Sorry, I'm cracking up. So y'all just did a fantastic job, and yeah, pretty dope.
I agree.
Made me proud. Made me proud. I was kind of nervous. I was a little nervous. I was like, is this process going to get crazy again? But it worked out nicely. So thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great work, everyone.
Proud of what we did. Thank you.
Have a good rest of your day.
Happy Monday. Bye.
Bye.